Something has shifted in the quietest corner of your soulmate's heart, and the surprising part is not that they are happy, it is why that happiness keeps bringing their thoughts back to you. There is something they have been holding close, something they have rehearsed in their mind more than once, and today it no longer feels like a thought they can simply carry in silence. Imagine them moving through an ordinary moment, perhaps sitting with their phone nearby, perhaps finishing something small that normally would have taken all their attention, when suddenly a smile appears without warning. Not the kind of smile created by a joke or a passing distraction. This one stays. It follows a memory. It belongs to a realization. And somehow, your name is sitting quietly in the center of it. They have been noticing something about themselves lately, something they did not fully understand when it first began. Certain moments feel lighter. Certain decisions feel clearer. Even the future, which once seemed like a collection of unanswered questions, has started feeling strangely possible. And every time they try to understand what changed, their thoughts return to the same place. You. Not because they believe you are responsible for every good thing happening around them, but because knowing you has changed the way they understand what genuine connection can feel like. That realization has been growing slowly, and now they need to tell you something very important. There is a detail you would never notice from the outside. Your soulmate has already imagined the conversation. They have pictured the opening words, changed them, abandoned them, then started again. They do not want this moment to sound dramatic. They do not want to overwhelm you. They simply want to be understood correctly, because what they are carrying is more sincere than anything they could express casually. At one point, they almost reached for their phone. Their fingers moved toward it, then stopped. Not because they changed their mind, but because the message suddenly felt too meaningful for a few hurried sentences. Have you ever had something beautiful to say and discovered that ordinary words somehow felt too small? That is where they are now. Happiness has given them courage, but it has also made them careful. They want you to hear the truth behind the words, not merely the words themselves. Don't skip this quiet part, because it explains something you may have misunderstood for longer than you realize. Their silence was not emptiness. Their hesitation was not indifference. Sometimes a person becomes quiet when they finally understand that what they are feeling deserves to be handled with care. Then came the moment that changed the entire tone of their day. Nothing spectacular happened around them. No dramatic interruption. No impossible coincidence. Just one small reminder of you. Maybe it was a phrase you once used. Maybe a song passed through the room. Maybe they noticed something you would have laughed at. Whatever the trigger was, it opened a memory they had not expected to revisit. And this time, instead of feeling confused by how deeply it affected them, they simply allowed themselves to feel it. That is when the happiness became undeniable. Your soulmate realized they were no longer asking themselves whether you mattered. They were asking themselves what they were going to do about the fact that you mattered so much. There is an enormous difference between those two questions. One keeps a person trapped in uncertainty. The other begins moving them toward honesty. For perhaps the first time in a while, they stop trying to reduce the connection into something easier to explain. They stopped measuring it. Stopped trying to predict every outcome. They simply acknowledged what was already there. And strangely, that acceptance brought peace. Something important is waiting for you inside that peace. Your soulmate has been changing the way they think about happiness itself. There was a time when they thought happiness had to arrive after everything was settled, after every question had an answer, after every part of life became perfectly arranged. But lately they have discovered something gentler. Happiness can exist while life is still unfinished. It can arrive while two people are still figuring things out. It can grow inside an imperfect conversation. It can begin with one person finally deciding to be truthful. And that is precisely why they want to speak now. They are not waiting for some flawless future moment anymore. They are beginning to understand that sincerity matters more than perfect timing. There is something almost beautiful about that realization, because it means the message they want to give you is not coming from panic or loneliness. It is coming from clarity. They are happy. They are calmer. And from that calmer place, one particular truth has become impossible for them to ignore. Here is where the story becomes more personal than you might expect. Your soulmate has been remembering the version of themselves that existed before this connection became meaningful. They remember how easily they could avoid vulnerable conversations. How quickly they could distract themselves whenever emotions became complicated. How comfortable it was to leave certain things unspoken and tell themselves that silence was easier. But you somehow became the exception to that pattern. Not because you forced anything from them. Quite the opposite. Something about the way you affected them made them want to understand themselves more deeply. They started noticing what they valued. What they missed. What they were afraid to admit. And somewhere in that process, a simple realization emerged. The person they want to become is someone who does not hide meaningful things from people who matter. That is why this conversation is becoming necessary. It is not merely about revealing a feeling. It is about choosing a different way of showing up. Stay till the end of this moment, because the next detail is where their happiness begins to make sense. Your soulmate recently pictured something surprisingly ordinary with you. Not a grand celebration. Not an impossible dream. Something simple. Sitting near you after a long day. Sharing a quiet meal. Hearing you talk about something that matters to you. Laughing over something neither of you expected to be funny. And what surprised them was how strongly that ordinary picture affected them. It felt peaceful. Familiar, even. They realized they were not only drawn to dramatic moments with you. They were drawn to the possibility of everyday life feeling warmer because you were part of it. That realization stayed with them much longer than they expected. It followed them into the next hour, then the next. And somewhere inside that ordinary imagined scene, they understood what they had been trying to tell themselves for weeks: they do not only miss your attention. They miss your presence. That difference matters. Attention can be replaced by noise, messages, distractions, people, plans. Presence cannot. Presence is the feeling of being understood without performing. It is the calm that appears when someone's existence changes the atmosphere of a room. Your soulmate has begun recognizing that this is what they associate with you. And no, they do not expect you to be perfect. In fact, part of what makes this realization so powerful is that they have stopped idealizing the connection. They are thinking about the real you. Your little habits. Your pauses. Your strengths. Your moments of uncertainty. The parts of you that are easy to admire and the parts that simply make you human. They are seeing the connection more realistically now, and somehow that has made their feelings feel stronger, not weaker. Because fantasy disappears when reality arrives. Yet here, reality has only made them more certain that something deserves to be said. A strange thing happened when they accepted that. They began feeling grateful. Not sentimental gratitude that disappears after a few minutes, but a quiet appreciation for everything the connection revealed inside them. They started remembering moments they once overlooked. A conversation that seemed ordinary at the time. Something kind you did without making a performance of it. A moment when you listened. A moment when you stepped back instead of pushing. A moment when they realized you were paying attention to something other people might have missed. These memories are collecting now, almost like separate pieces suddenly forming one picture. And the picture is showing them something they were not ready to see earlier. You influenced their emotional world in ways they never properly acknowledged. That does not mean every moment was easy. It means the difficult moments did not erase what was genuine. If anything, those moments forced them to recognize which parts of the connection were real enough to survive misunderstanding. And now comes the question your soulmate keeps asking themselves: how do you tell someone that their presence changed you without making it sound larger than life? How do you explain that happiness did not make you forget them, it made you understand them differently? This is the sentence they keep circling around. They expected clarity to make them move on from complicated feelings. Instead, clarity showed them which feelings were worth keeping. Think about that for a moment. Sometimes people assume that confusion is what keeps a connection alive. But your soulmate is discovering the opposite. The clearer they become, the more certain they feel that there is something sincere between you that deserves an honest conversation. That is the message beneath everything else. They do not want to keep communicating through guesses, distant signals, unfinished sentences, or imagined meanings. They want something simpler. Something real. Their phone enters the story again here. This time, they actually pick it up. The screen lights their face for a moment. They open the place where your name appears, and they sit there longer than they planned. There are so many possible ways to begin. I've been thinking. Too vague. Can we talk? Too serious. Something happened. Not quite true. Because nothing happened in one dramatic instant. This has been happening slowly, quietly, through dozens of small realizations. They type something. Delete it. Write another sentence. Stop again. Then they laugh softly at themselves because they recognize the irony. The very conversation meant to simplify everything has become difficult to begin. Yet this time they do not close the screen. That matters. Their old instinct would have been to postpone. Their new instinct is telling them to stay. What they eventually type is much simpler than all the versions they imagined. It does not contain every feeling. It does not explain the whole story. But it opens the door. And even before sending anything, your soulmate feels lighter because they have finally admitted to themselves what they want, a chance to speak honestly with you. Not to control what happens afterward. Not to demand a certain response. Simply to stop hiding what has become clear. Their happiness has taught them that meaningful connections are not supposed to survive entirely on assumptions. At some point, someone has to risk being understood. And they are beginning to believe that person should be them. There is another layer, though, and this is the part they have not yet found the courage to put into a message. Their important news is connected to a decision they recently made. A personal decision. Quiet, thoughtful, and very real. It changes the way they see the next chapter of their life, and somehow you are connected to the reason they finally made it. Not because the decision belongs to you. It belongs completely to them. But your influence helped them recognize what they truly wanted. They have been carrying that realization with an almost childlike happiness, wanting to tell you and wondering how you will react when you understand what it means. They know you might not expect it. In fact, that is one reason they have been smiling. For now, they are keeping one final sentence to themselves. It is the sentence that explains why they suddenly feel so hopeful, why the future stopped looking distant, and why your name has become connected to a choice they once thought they would never be ready to make. They have almost said it aloud more than once. Tonight, perhaps, they will finally stop rehearsing it. Because the truth is no longer asking to remain hidden. And when you hear what your soulmate has decided, you may finally understand why their happiness began at the exact moment they stopped running from what you truly mean to them. The sentence they have been afraid to say is not dramatic at all, and perhaps that is exactly why it carries so much weight. Your soulmate has realized that happiness feels different when there is someone you genuinely want to share it with. For a long time, they thought the important conversation would happen because something went wrong, because emotions became too heavy, because distance finally became unbearable. But that is not what brought them here. Something went right. Something inside them settled. A question they had quietly carried for longer than you knew finally stopped feeling confusing, and instead of wanting to escape the answer, they found themselves smiling at it. That smile is where this next part begins, because when your soulmate looked at the future recently, they noticed something unusual. They were no longer imagining how to protect themselves from disappointment. They were imagining what it might feel like to build something meaningful without constantly expecting it to disappear. And almost immediately, they thought of you. Not an idealized version of you. Not some perfect image created by longing. You exactly as they have come to know you. The way you think, the way you sometimes become quiet, the way certain things matter deeply to you even when you do not announce them, the way your presence has somehow remained emotionally recognizable even through uncertainty. That recognition is what finally led them toward the decision they have been keeping private. For once, they are not trying to calculate every possible outcome. They are asking themselves a much simpler question. What would I choose if I stopped allowing hesitation to make every decision for me? The answer surprised them. It also made them happier than they expected. Don't skip this part, because the decision itself only makes sense when you understand what happened just before they made it. A few days ago, during an ordinary stretch of time, your soulmate found themselves looking back at several moments from the connection. They were not searching for memories intentionally. One appeared, then another. A conversation. A misunderstanding. Something you once said that they did not fully appreciate at the time. A moment when they wanted to respond differently but allowed pride, uncertainty, or simple nervousness to keep them quiet. And instead of becoming trapped in regret, they saw those memories from a completely different angle. They realized they had spent too much energy wondering whether every moment meant something and not enough time asking what the entire pattern meant. Once they looked at the pattern, the answer became clearer. You kept appearing in the moments that mattered. When they felt excited, part of them wanted you to know. When something made them laugh, they imagined telling you. When they experienced a difficult day, your presence crossed their mind not as an escape, but as a reminder of what genuine understanding felt like. And when something recently made them deeply happy, their first instinct was not to keep it private. It was to tell you. That instinct stopped them. They actually sat with it. Why you? Why had their mind traveled toward you so naturally? Why, after everything that had remained unsaid, did you still feel like the person they wanted to share good news with? The answer did not arrive as a thunderous revelation. It came softly, because somewhere along the way, you became connected in their mind with emotional home. Not ownership. Not dependency. Something much healthier and quieter. Familiarity. Safety. Recognition. The ability to feel seen without having to constantly explain yourself. And suddenly your soulmate understood that what they were protecting themselves from was not the connection itself. They were protecting themselves from the possibility that something this meaningful could actually require courage from them. There is a difference, and they finally see it. Their happiness is coming partly from knowing that they are no longer willing to let old hesitation make new decisions. Something important is waiting for you in that realization. Your soulmate has begun choosing honesty over guessing. They have begun choosing conversations over assumptions. And that personal decision, the one they have not fully explained yet, is connected to exactly that change. They have decided that when the opportunity comes to speak with you openly, they are not going to hide behind vague language anymore. They want to tell you what changed inside them. They want you to know that somewhere during all the uncertainty, they stopped asking whether they could forget what they felt and started asking whether they wanted to. The answer was no. And strangely, admitting that did not make them feel trapped. It made them feel free. That freedom is the happiness you would notice if you could see them now. Their shoulders feel lighter. Their thoughts do not race in quite the same way. They are no longer fighting every hopeful possibility simply because it cannot be guaranteed. They understand now that no meaningful relationship comes with complete certainty before it begins. People choose to know each other. They choose to listen. They choose to show up. They choose to discover whether something can grow. Your soulmate has finally reached the point where discovering the truth with you feels more meaningful than endlessly wondering about it from a distance. And that is why their message matters so much. They are not preparing some perfect speech. They are preparing themselves to be present. A few hours after that realization, they did something small that would look completely insignificant to anyone else. They opened an old conversation. They did not scroll endlessly or search desperately for hidden meanings. They simply read a few exchanges and stopped on one message from you. It was ordinary. Maybe you would not even remember sending it. Yet there was something about the tone that affected them now in a way it had not before. You had been sincere. No performance, no attempt to impress, no complicated strategy. Just sincere. They stared at that message and realized how rare sincerity can feel when people become afraid of showing too much. Then they wondered whether you ever knew how carefully they had remembered little things about you. The answer was probably no, because they had not told you. That realization made them laugh at themselves again. How could you know what they never expressed? How could you understand the depth behind silence when they offered you almost no language for it? This was one of the most important realizations they had experienced in a long time. Expecting another person to understand feelings you refuse to communicate is unfair to both people. Your soulmate does not want to live inside that pattern anymore. So they made themselves a quiet promise. The next time something meaningful needs to be said, they will say enough for you to actually understand. Not everything at once. Not some overwhelming confession. Just the truth, clearly and kindly. And there is one truth in particular that they are getting ready to share. Stay till the end, because even your soulmate did not fully understand it until recently. They used to think their strongest feeling toward you was missing you. Then they assumed it was curiosity. At another point they called it attachment, because that explanation seemed easier and less vulnerable. But happiness has changed the way they interpret the connection. When a person is unhappy, it can sometimes be difficult to know whether they miss someone or simply miss comfort. Your soulmate wondered about that too. They questioned themselves more carefully than you might imagine. But now something has changed. They are experiencing genuine moments of peace and happiness independently of you, and yet in those moments they still want you there. That distinction has become incredibly meaningful to them. They do not only think of you when something is missing. They think of you when life feels full. They do not only want your presence during lonely moments. They want to share good moments with you too. They do not only imagine receiving reassurance from you. They imagine giving you reassurance, supporting your happiness, listening to what excites you, being someone whose presence adds something calm rather than complicated to your life. This realization completely reframed what they thought they were feeling. Perhaps the connection was never simply about filling an emptiness. Perhaps they genuinely value who you are. Once they admitted that, the important thing they needed to tell you became much clearer. They want you to know they are not returning emotionally because they are unhappy somewhere else. They are not thinking of you because their life suddenly became empty. Quite the opposite. They are happy enough to finally see their feelings without confusing them with loneliness. And what they see is you. There is something almost ironic about it. Your soulmate once believed that if they became happier, calmer, and more secure within themselves, thoughts of you would naturally fade. They thought emotional clarity might reduce the connection to something temporary. Instead, clarity removed the noise around it. What remained was gentler, but stronger. They no longer need every interaction to prove something. They no longer need constant signs. They simply recognize that you matter. Sometimes emotional maturity does not make a meaningful feeling disappear. It makes the feeling less chaotic and more truthful. That is what has happened here. Your soulmate is not standing at the edge of some dramatic emotional storm. They are standing in a much quieter place, realizing they still choose the thought of you. And now another detail has entered their mind. They have begun wondering what happiness looks like from your side. Have you been changing too? Have you started wanting different things? Have you become more protective of your peace? Have you reached a point where words alone would no longer impress you and consistent actions would matter more? These questions are shaping the way they plan to approach you, because your soulmate understands something they may not have understood before. Caring about someone means caring about the reality of their experience, not merely the story you hope they fit into. They do not want to assume you have been waiting in exactly the same emotional place. They want to meet the person you are now. That thought humbles them. It also excites them, because perhaps there are parts of you they still have not discovered. Maybe the next chapter is not about returning to an old version of the connection. Maybe it is about seeing whether two changed people can create something healthier than what either of them imagined before. This is where their private decision becomes more concrete. Your soulmate has decided they want to stop approaching the connection through memory alone. Memories have their place, but they want to know what is true now. They want a real conversation. They want to hear your voice without mentally writing your answers for you. They want to ask how you have been and actually listen instead of searching every sentence for confirmation. They want the space between you to become less crowded with assumptions. And if there is still something worth exploring, they want it to grow naturally rather than being forced into some predetermined outcome. This decision may sound simple, but for them it represents an enormous internal shift. They are finally willing to let reality answer questions that imagination has been carrying for too long. Then came another small moment. Your soulmate walked past a mirror, caught sight of themselves, and smiled because they realized how much energy they had once spent pretending not to care. There was something almost funny about it now. All those attempts to look unaffected. All those moments of typing something and deleting it. All the times they tried to act as if the connection had not changed them. None of that altered the truth inside them. And when they finally stopped judging themselves for caring, the caring became much easier to understand. It was not weakness. It was information. It was their heart telling them that this person, this connection, this unfinished conversation deserved conscious attention. Whether the future becomes friendship, deeper connection, renewed closeness, or simply one meaningful honest exchange, your soulmate no longer wants silence to be the thing that decides for both of you. That is important. They are not trying to guarantee an ending. They are choosing to create an honest beginning. There is one more piece they have not told anyone. After recognizing all of this, they wrote something down. Not in a message to you. Not yet. They opened a notebook, or perhaps the notes section on their phone, and wrote a few sentences only for themselves. The first was about what they had learned. The second was about what they regretted not saying sooner. But the third sentence surprised them. They stared at it for a long time because it revealed the true reason behind their happiness. That sentence was not about the past at all. It was about what they wanted next. They had written, in their own way, that they wanted to give this connection a real chance to exist outside imagination. A chance does not mean a promise. It means openness. It means curiosity. It means finding out rather than forever wondering. And when they saw those words in front of them, something inside them became still. That was the decision. That was what had been forming beneath everything. Your soulmate wants the possibility of a genuine new chapter with you, built slowly enough to be real and honestly enough to feel safe for both of you. But there is an even more personal reason they want that chance, and this is the part they have struggled to express. They have realized that you brought out a version of them they actually like. Around the thought of you, they became more reflective. They started questioning old habits. They became more aware of what communication means. They began noticing the difference between intensity and intimacy, between wanting someone's attention and wanting to truly understand them. You did not create those changes for them, they made the changes themselves. Yet the connection became one of the mirrors through which they recognized what needed to grow. And now, standing on the other side of that growth, they feel grateful. Not because everything happened perfectly. It did not. But sometimes an imperfect connection can still teach two people something honest. Your soulmate is beginning to believe that whatever happens next, they do not want gratitude to remain unspoken. They want to tell you that knowing you mattered. They want you to understand that certain words, moments, and acts of kindness were not forgotten. They want you to know they see the connection differently now. And beneath all of that, there is one more sentence waiting. One they have not written anywhere yet. It appears when they imagine looking directly at you instead of communicating through a screen. It appears when they picture the nervous little pause before an honest conversation begins. It appears when they imagine you wondering why they suddenly seem so happy. They can almost hear themselves saying it, "I finally know what I want to stop running from." But even that is not the complete message. Because what they need to tell you is not only that they want to explore what remains between you. There is something they have recently changed in their life, something practical, something connected to the way they intend to make room for what genuinely matters. And that change is the reason this conversation may happen sooner than you think. They have already taken the first small step. They have already moved something that once stood in the way. And when you discover exactly what they changed, you will understand why their happiness is not just a passing mood. It is connected to a choice they have finally made about the kind of future they are ready to create, and the person they hope will be there when they begin.